and welcome to this episode of the Social CMO Show. I'm your host, the social data girl, Shilpi Agarwal, and my guest today is the Chief Marketing Officer of Hubspot, Mike Volpe. Welcome, Mike, to the show.
Thanks a ton. I'm really excited to be here. It's going to be great.
So, Mike, HubSpot is a household name in marketing now. Everybody knows about it. But for the 2 or 3 people listening to the show who don't know what HubSpot is, please tell us about HubSpot.
Yeah, sure. So HubSpot's a marketing and sales software company. We have a whole bunch of marketing and now sales tools integrated into one platform to help companies grow. So generate more leads through social, through SEO, through content, through email, and then all the analytics. We have a CRM system and a great product for sales reps called Sidekick as well. So tons of products for marketing and sales teams to help them grow.
Fantastic. I'm a great fan of HubSpot. So tell us, Mike, you joined the company when, they were like, you were the 5th employee at HubSpot. So what made you, excited about it? Was it the product, the company, the vision? What really excited you to join them?
Yeah, so at the time, they only had, 7 or 8 customers. The product was definitely sort of at an alpha or beta stage. So for me, it was really the vision. And I've been doing marketing for a long time, and I had run into all the challenges and problems and that they were trying to solve. So, I knew that there was a way to make marketing more effective, and that, using more online, more digital, more content, whatever you want to call it, it ended up being, becoming called inbound. But whatever you want to call that stuff, I knew that that stuff was more effective. And I also knew that there weren't any good tools to do it. And there was no good centralized platform to really sort of put all your marketing together and have a good view of your customer relationships. And so that vision really struck a chord with me, because I had felt that pain. I think a lot of people, when you start a company, if you have felt the pain that your customers feel, then you're really passionate about it. And then here we are 8 years later, and I'm still really passionate about it. And I still think, it's that same pain is there for a lot of people, and we still have that value that we can bring, which is great.
Wow, awesome. So it was a vision and the pain point that really, drew you towards HubSpot. That's really interesting. So speaking of which, like growth, so you grew the company from like handful of leads to 50,000 leads a month. That's incredible. How was there a process you followed? How did you do it?
Yeah, I mean, people need to understand that that's over a period of like 8 years, right? So it's not like, hey, 2 months later. And I think a couple things to know about that too is over 80% of the leads that we generate are from inbound. So they're unpaid, they're not advertising driven. So this wasn't like we went and raised a ton of money from VCs and just dumped that into Google or LinkedIn or Facebook ads. This is really trying to leverage all the organic channels that are out there. And a lot of the leads come from our blog. Our blog gets over 2 million visits a month. It's one of the most widely read blogs in sort of the marketing and sales industry. We actually have more traffic than some media companies with our blog. And so a lot of it's been kind of content centric and much more of an inbound strategy. So even from the early days, the founders were blogging before I joined, and that was back in 2006. And when I joined, we upped the volume of posting that we were doing on the blog. We started to leverage social media a little bit more as once Twitter came out and some other tools like that. Definitely tried to leverage SEO as much as possible. And then I hired someone to help us increase the blogging frequency. We started to create other forms of content, some video content. Once SlideShare came out, started to do a lot more presentations there, and just trying to use all the different platforms and trying to have as much content as possible, and really just build an audience that way. And, here we are 8 years later, and we get, for a B2B company, a pretty high volume of traffic. And that's really what contributes to all that lead generation. And again, most of it being organic. So there's not like 1 or 2 little things. It's like a whole long process that you build up to. But I think the great news is that the internet today and all the media tools that are available to you allow you to really be your own. I mean, here you're being your own television station right now, right? And you didn't buy a television station. You just pressed a couple buttons, and here you are, right? And so that same power is available to every single person, every single company. So there's a real advantage to the smaller challengers that want to go out and build a big brand, without having hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think there's a real advantage to the newer folks today and the challengers and the upstarts, and I think it's very exciting.
So what I'm hearing from you is like 80% of your growth was to the inbound marketing efforts, you would say, and more so to content, but like what percentage would you say to all your inbound marketing efforts, be it social, be it SEO, be it content? Can you like tell us like a little bit about percentages? I think sounds like you're leaning more towards heavily towards content, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the interesting thing for us is I think the way that we think about it is that, so out of the 50,000 leads, almost half come from our blog today. Now, and again, you need to remember, well, what drives the blog? Well, there's SEO that goes to the blog, there's social that goes to the blog, and things like that. So if you really, one way of thinking about it is that they're all sort of relatively equivalent weights. But I think the real thing is that having our blog is kind of the center of mass of a lot of those efforts. So, you know, without the blog content, I don't think we'd be as interesting on social. Without the blog content, I don't think we'd be as effective with SEO. And so social and SEO are certainly big components of it, but the blog is kind of the thing that ties it all together for us. And that's, I think, to me, one of the real major assets we have. You know, there's other things that we do too. Like we have a free tool called Marketing Grader that you can type in your URL and get a free report about your marketing. And there's lots of other types of content that we have too. So I mentioned SlideShare. We also have a great podcast that we just launched 2 months ago, audio only, called The Growth Show.
I'm going to come to that.
Yeah. So we've seen a huge amount of traffic there, and so it's, you know, it's in iTunes. It's called The Growth Show, and you know, we've seen a lot of traffic with that start to grow really fast just in the first couple months. But yeah, it's like all these things kind of work together. But to me, for us, the center of mass, the center of gravity is really the blog, I think.
The blog. So how do you decide, what tools do you use to really, you know, get a pulse on what your audience really, the kind of content that your audience really is looking for? What do you use any tools to do that? Or how do you decide on what content to write or produce?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there's kind of when you're in the early days and you don't have a big audience yet, is probably a little different answer than where we're at today. So for today, you know, we post, many posts per day. We're probably at, between our 3 different blogs, we're probably at 5 to 7 posts per day, if not more than that. And so we get a lot of comments, we get a lot of reaction in social media. We have hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter and Facebook. So we get a lot of interaction with our audience on a daily basis, just their feedback on different parts of content. And I think that all of our content folks get a lot of feedback from the audience, a lot of understanding what the audience is interested in from those types of interactions. If you're not getting those kind of interactions, maybe you're just starting out like we were 8 years ago, then I think you need to figure out how to use social, how to use, you know, even in person, to really kind of get a sense for your buyer persona and do it. And it's okay to do a fair amount of research there. I mean, one of the things that I did within the first few months of joining HubSpot was talk to a lot of our potential buyers, get a real sense of who they were, what topics were interesting to them, things like that. And those buyer personas that we created back in 2007 are actually, they've been slightly changed and altered over time, but they're still the same buyer personas that we use. So if you do the right things in creating those buyer personas, that research can really withstand the test of time.
Interesting. And this market research was mostly like actually reaching out to people, or was it through surveys, or how did you do this create the buyer personas?
Yeah, so most of it was conversation. So I think that when you're really trying to figure out like who is your buyer, I think a lot of it needs to come more from conversations and more of the qualitative research. So it can be in person, it can be online, it can be email, it can be all sorts of ways, but you really need to understand who is that person, what drives them, what are they interested in, what are their big challenges, what are they afraid of, what are they in love with, you know, what's their relationship with their boss, what are they scared of in their career. All those things you really need to understand. I think it's hard to uncover that through just surveys. I think once you know who that buyer persona is, then if you want to refine it and get an understanding of exactly what are the things, like, you know, what is a higher priority for them, or you want to refine that, then using surveys can be really effective too. But initially for us, we were just trying to talk to as many people about our product and our vision of the company. And so I probably talked to 40 or 50 potential buyers. And it was through all those conversations, that we talked to a whole bunch. And through those conversations, we really got to understand them pretty well. And then it was just a question of how do you boil that down into kind of a summary description of who that person is.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your customers. Like, you've grown the customers from a handful of customers to 13,500 customers in 90 different countries. So how did you reduce the churn rate in a SaaS-based model? What did you do to keep the churn rate low?
Yeah, so great question. So, for us, our average customer pays us about $10,000 a year. So they're not the biggest businesses in the world, but they're also not the smallest. Like we're sort of larger customers than like SurveyMonkey or Constant Contact would have as customers, but smaller customers than the big enterprises. So they're sort of in that sweet spot of the mid market, which I think is interesting. And you're right, in any recurring revenue business, having a lower churn rate is extremely important because that's really what drives, what helps enable higher revenue growth. And the interesting thing is, if you look at over the history of HubSpot, we just went public about 6 months ago. So a lot of our data is now publicly available through our IPO process. And if you look 3 or 4 years ago, our retention rates were good, but they weren't amazing. And we were definitely losing some amount of revenue, sort of 10, 20% revenue per year we were losing from customers leaving. And what we've been able to do since then is, like, I think last quarter we just reported it was almost 100% revenue retention. So, there's a lot of things you can do to drive revenue retention. We could do a whole episode about that, but I think the key things is, make the product better, help onboard so it's like better product, but also make sure you're getting the right customers to sell up. I think it's very easy when you're trying to grow fast to sign up the wrong customers. So we really looked at this sort of retention problem as across all the groups. So marketing had to market to the right customers, filter down to the right customers, only give the right leads to the sales team. Sales had to close the right customers for the right reasons. Services had to onboard the right customers in the right way, and the product team had to build a spectacular product. And when you do all of those things well and you have good alignment across the company, I think those are the things, the conditions that really lead to a much lower churn rate. And then on top of that, the one thing I would add is having some products to upsell to your happiest customers is super powerful. We didn't really have anything to upsell to our customers for 5 or 6 years at HubSpot, just because we were so heads down on building our original product, the original vision. Having something, you have happy customers that want to spend more money with you, giving them something else to buy can be super helpful in reducing that revenue churn too.
Cool. So you just talked about going public. So my next question is about that. You guys went public last year with an $880 million evaluation. What has changed since then as a CMO for you?
Yeah, so going public was an awesome experience. We got to go down sort of one of these things where, especially been trying to build the company for 8 years, it's one of those things where it's not the end of the journey, but it's a really significant milestone along the way, and that's very exciting. It was a lot of fun. I'll be honest, not that much has changed. I mean, you mentioned the market cap of, I think it was around 800 or something when we went public, but the market cap is now 1.2 billion, so that's exciting. But to be honest, in my daily job as a CMO, not that much has changed. I mean, we keep growing, the team keeps getting bigger, but the public versus private thing is not that different. I think we try to do a lot of things to make sure that being public didn't actually change our culture in ways we didn't want. And so we try to do as much as possible to kind of keep the culture mostly the same. And I think we've been pretty successful in that. There's very little about my job has changed, which I think is a good thing. And it's kind of the way we wanted it.
Cool. So if you had a choice to go back and change one thing about looking back, what you did, and what would you do different today?
Oh boy, what would I do differently today? One thing. I think I'll give you one good thing. I mentioned this earlier. We didn't have anything to upsell to our customers, any additional products, we had literally no way for them to give us more money for years, and that was a mistake. We should have thought about that earlier. Our churn numbers would have been much better. Our retention numbers would have been much higher in the earlier days of the business if we'd had other products to upsell to them earlier on. That's one real specific thing where it took us a long time to get there, and once we got there, the numbers have only gotten better. But that's something, if we had that earlier on in the business, I think our numbers would have been better even earlier.
The growth would have been smoother and faster, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So what are your top 3 marketing challenges today as a big brand, marketing brand, HubSpot is? Yeah,
it's interesting. I'd say the top, I give you the top 2 that I think about a lot are international. So we have customers in 90 countries. We have partners in I think 70, 80 countries, something like that. So we have thousands of partners around the world. We really are a global brand, but we only have offices in, outside Boston and in Dublin, Ireland, and Sydney, Australia. So, and the Sydney office is relatively new. It's only 9 months old. So we don't have a physical global presence, and trying to become more of an international company, thinking about more languages, how do we have more global coverage without opening an office in every single country so we can keep things sort of lightweight and efficient is something we think about a lot. So the challenges of international, and you can't not be an international company today because of the global nature of the web. So the challenges of international are one big thing. The second big challenge is that I think about a lot is how do we become a multi-product company? So I think I alluded earlier, we started off with marketing software, but this past fall we launched CRM. We launched another product called Sidekick, which is a free product for salespeople that people can check out at getsidekick.com. And so we now need to market to salespeople and marketers. We need to market to a little bit more whole of the company, the executives of the company as well. And what are all the challenges that come along with marketing multiple products to multiple buyers? That's a different set of challenges, and there's some ways we're working on that, but that's the international and the multi-product stuff are the things that I'm mostly focused on.
Cool. So speaking of challenges, you grew the inbound marketing challenge from like 0 to 10,000 attendees. Was it in a year or was it over time? And how did you do it?
Yeah, so for that conference that we have, with the conference that we do called Inbound in Boston, and we've grown that from the first year we had, I think it was around 1,100 people, and you're right, last year it was 10,000. And that was over 4 years. So it was like 1,100, 2,800, 5,500, then 10,000. And hopefully it would be 13 or 15,000 this year. But yeah, it's, to me, the key with growing a conference is having awesome content. Most conferences, the content there, the presentations are average quality. And we do a lot of work to make sure we have the best presentations. And then we survey the attendees. We make sure that they're extremely happy. So we get really, really high marks for the people that attend that conference. And I think they talk to each other and we get a very high repeat rate. And so it's one of those things where if you have a high repeat rate and people are saying very good things about the conference, I think that really helps grow it.
Absolutely. Great things and good word of mouth definitely is better than any other form of advertising these days.
Exactly right.
Okay, cool. So that brings me to your podcast, your growth show. I love your growth show. It's quickly become, the top 10 business podcast to listen to. Why did you start? So 2 questions here. Why did you think about starting it? And how are you, growing it so quickly? I know the answer, you would say content, but still I want to hear.
No, there's a couple tricks too. So yeah, so we started it because as we become a multi-product company, we need to start to think about more of the executive audience. So we're doing a lot of marketing to the marketing department, managers, directors within marketing. And those folks read our blog, as you mentioned earlier, it's like what marketers haven't heard of HubSpot. And that's because we get millions of them to read our blog every single month and, and also touch a lot of the other things we do. But we didn't actually have as much of a relationship with that marketing team's boss or the executive that runs maybe sales and marketing or the CEO of the company. And we wanted to figure out what's a good way to reach that audience. And we actually thought that maybe blogging wasn't necessarily the right touch point for them. And they're more likely to ride in the car. They're more likely to be, maybe have some sort of a commute. They probably want to hear a little bit more from their peers as opposed to just someone pontificating to them about what they think. And so we said put that together. We created a new show called The Growth Show. It's audio only, so it's just listening in your car. And we have all the guests on there. The format of the show is not me or someone else from HubSpot just telling you what we think. It's interviewing people that we think these executives would respect as peers. So I interviewed the CMO of Slack, this guy named Bill Macedas, who's also CMO.
That show. I just this morning.
Bill's awesome. He's great. We've interviewed other people that are board members, and it tends to be mostly like C-level executive types. The CEO of Tough Mudder, who's kind of created a really interesting company that was totally bootstrapped. So some really interesting stories, and I think that's having people that our target persona that we're trying to attract with is those executives, having someone that they see as a peer. Has been a huge part of it. And so that's what we're trying to do with the show. But then, the part of the reason why it's growing so fast is, we have a huge amount of web traffic. We have a ton of people that are opted into our emails, right? We have a huge social media audience. So what that enables you to do is launch things a little bit more quickly. So by, tweeting about the Grow Show, we can get, a decent number of people to click on it and to start to listen to the show and things like that. Through email and through featuring it on different parts of our website and things like that, you can direct people to it. So the nice thing about marketing is once you build up an audience in one place, you can use that audience to sort of cross-pollinate other things that you're doing. And so it's definitely grown faster because we launched it in year 8, not year 1, right? So there's definitely an advantage there. But you're right, having good guests I think matters a lot too, and having the show be a good show, that helps too.
Definitely. So Mike, you're a big proponent of like using analytics. I would say you use analytics for everything as a CMO, as a base point. What are the top 3 KPIs that you look at on a daily basis?
Yeah, so on a daily basis, that's a fair point. There are a bunch of things we look at on a daily basis. So one of the top things we look at on a daily basis is we've picked kind of one point in our conversion funnel, and for us that's MQLs, or marketing qualified leads. And for that, we're trying to measure. We have different goals set up for each portion of our sales team, and so there's 4 or 5 different places where we're trying to measure. And we actually have a daily goal set up for those. So it's not, we have a monthly goal, but then the monthly goal translates into daily goals. And so it's sort of like, I always explain it to people that if back when the Olympics, the Summer Olympics were on television, they used to show in swimming, they'd have that yellow line in the pool. And like, as the swimmers are going, you can see what the world record pace was. And you can see if they're close to the record pace or not. Well, the great thing about marketing and business is you can show yourself where that yellow line is. The swimmers in the pool couldn't see it. It was superimposed on the TV, but you can send out a graph every single day that says, hey, you're 10% behind your goal, or you're 10% ahead of your goal. And when you're behind and you're 10% behind, there's a lot of things you can do to catch up. So by looking at those lead generation goals, whatever that sort of SLA is you have with your sales team, whatever you're trying to provide the sales team, and for us, again, it's MQLs, looking at that on a daily basis is something that's really important. Beyond that, I look at sort of some aggregate website traffic to the blog, get a couple other things. But to be honest, that MQL number is probably the one that I check every single day. And of course, revenue, I check up on the sales team and see how they're doing too. So it's both of those things. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I have so many questions. We'll probably need another show to catch them all. But, last question for today. What is the future of inbound marketing according to you, and how do you see social data fitting in? Yeah,
so great point. So, we were just talking earlier about a bunch of data. Data across all of marketing is super important, right? So there's so much more you can analyze and use in terms of data and making your marketing more effective, but also all the data that's available out there. Like there's tons of data that you can get about your potential buyers through social media. It's all on the web now, and it didn't used to be, and you need to figure out ways to leverage that stuff too. I feel like the future of inbound marketing is to become a little bit more holistic and grow beyond just the content channel, right? So a lot of people sort of leverage content, we do as well, but I think there's other things in terms of, leveraging free tools, more social, more other types of interactions, even maybe freemium models. And I think that sort of expansion and having the idea of not trying to interrupt people all day long, but trying to figure out how do you make them, want to interact with you, and how do you attract people to you, whether it's through social or through content or free tools, whatever it is. I think that stuff is really important. And that's I think where the future of inbound marketing is still going.
Awesome. Great advice. Thank you, Mike, for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks a ton for having me.
There you have it, folks. Wisdom from Mike Volpe, CMO of HubSpot. I'm your host signing off, but until next time, keep thinking social business nirvana.